Hello, everyone. It's Melissa here from Endo Empowered, and we are doing our live series this morning. So, if you're here with me, feel free to say a little hello in the chat. I would love to hear from you, if where you are, and tell me a little bit about yourself, whatever's going on. I have also put up a little poll for anyone who's attending live. So you can share what sort of pain you're struggling with at the moment, just so that I can get a better sense of where you're at and what I could focus on for this Tea with Mel series that we're running today. So, as part of the Tea with Mel series, I have some tea to share with you. So, the tea I'm sharing is actually, I don't know if you guys can get this where you are, depending on where you are in the world, but it's called Ticino. And it's a really cool brand. They make all sorts of blends of different things. And this one here is turkey tail and astragalus. And what I really like about this is it's quite rich. So it's quite dark and quite thick. So I will show you if you can see my tea. it's quite quite thick and quite sort of rich. Sort of has a similar feel, I guess, to coffee. So I quite like it. And of course, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I love my herbs. And turkey tail is one of the amazing things that can really support you with endometriosis. So, turkey tail has the ability to activate something called NK cells. NK cells are part of our immune arrangements. So there's lots of different things that happen in the immune system, and NK cells are one of the cells within that. And the job of NK cells is to essentially look for rogue cells. So when you think of what rogue cells are, normally people are thinking about cancer cells, but endometriosis are essentially the same thing. They're kind of cells in the wrong place. They're dispersed cells. So turkey tail has been shown to boost up those NK cells. And by doing that, they're essentially like our Pac-Man. So NK cells are like Pac-Man. They go around and they gobble up those rogue cells, which is, of course, is fantastic to overcome endometriosis. So that's why I've chosen this tea today. Astragalus has also been shown to support the immune system, particularly more around respiratory. So I don't want to say the C word, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, so that's why I chose that one. So that's why I chose that one. So sorry about that. I wasn't sure what happened there. So yeah, so feel free to have a vote if you're here with me live. If you have any specific questions that you want support around, there is also the option to share that in the chat. So I've got a vote here on having pain every single day. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that, what sort of pain is it? Is it like a dull ache? Is it sharp piercing pain? Do you notice any pattern with that at all? So is it worse in the morning, at night? Do you notice if it's worse when you eat or not eat? Like, the more information you can give me, the more I can support you in terms of what's actually happening with that particular pain. So, yeah, I have had a few people submit questions as well, but I like to give those who show up live the first option. So if you do have questions, if you want to share that in the comments section, then I can help you with those questions first. So I'll just give you guys a few minutes just to see if there's any questions that have come up. So let's have a look. Doesn't look like there's any other. Let's see if there's any other questions that have come up. So no, I don't see any other questions. Yeah, so just feel free to pop those in the chat box for me there. Okay, so what I might do is just explain pain with endometriosis, what's going on there, what's driving that. Oh, here we go. Here's one. Hi, is it Leisha? Nice to have you here. Okay, so Leisha just sharing that she has had pain for the last 2 weeks. It's more of an unsettled feeling in my stomach with some dull aching. Okay, so is it more at the top or is it more at the bottom? So is it more abdominal, lower abdominal? And in the stomach. So when you say stomach, do you mean further up? Because that makes quite a big difference. So yeah, if you want to just share a little bit more detail on that. Okay, so bottom. Okay, so that does sound like it could be endo related. It could also be digestion related. So I'm not sure how your diet is. Everyone's not doing great over Christmas, so don't feel badly. But generally, what's happening there is it's not just the endo. So oftentimes we think the pain is just the endo, but oftentimes there can be an overlap with it being the digestive system as well. They're very close together. And so when the digestive system is irritated and it becomes inflamed, that pain can radiate and then cause that endometriosis to feel more intense, particularly if the endometriosis lesions are sitting on the bowel, which is very common with endometriosis. So if you imagine the bowel and something has irritated it, so maybe you've had a diet that's maybe high in dairy or sugar or gluten, those things can irritate that gut lining. And then that becomes inflamed. So it's almost like a hose. If you imagine a hose, and normally that hose might be like this size, but then you eat something that it doesn't really like, so then it becomes inflamed and it expands. Now, if there's lesions of endometriosis on the outside of that, you're going to feel that more intensely. So it's kind of a combination. It's not one or the other. And I don't like to compartmentalize the body that much because everything overlaps onto everything else. So it's not like, oh, it's a digestive issue, so we'll tackle this, and oh, it's endo, so we'll tackle this. Everything that happens in the body has an effect on everything else. So when you have pain, it's overall, if you think about really simply, it's inflammation, and the best way I can explain inflammation is it's like it's a natural occurrence in the body. So your body naturally does this when it's trying to heal. And so if there is something that is, it feels is a problem, it will inflame that area as a way to bring blood flow to the area. So does that all make sense to you, Leisha? So feel free to just let me know. I just want to make sure that I'm explaining things. I'm not going too fast. So yeah, so the area becomes inflamed because it's trying to heal. Yeah, so your body feels inflamed and irritated. Yeah, cool, excellent. I'm glad it makes sense. Because yeah, it's sort of sometimes I don't know where you're at and what knowledge you've already gained. So it's helpful to know that it all makes sense. The best way to kind of understand inflammation is almost like a gauge, So if you imagine a gauge that can go up or down, and when it's at its highest, it's like in red. That's obviously when inflammation is really bad. And so there's things that we do in our life that make that gauge really high. And there's things we can do to bring it down. Okay. So we've already talked about things like sugar, gluten, dairy will make that gauge go up. But you can actually bring it down by shifting what you're eating. So there are foods that are highly anti-inflammatory. So particularly things that are green. Even if you think about it like really simplistically, red is like the color of warning. And when you think of something that's inflamed, it tends to be red. And when you think of green, it tends to be calming, it tends to be soothing. And so your counter is always going to be green stuff. And I'm not just meaning salads and lettuce, which great start if you're doing those things, ladies, but you can go more advanced than that. There are a lot of green foods out there that are highly, highly anti-inflammatory that can really lower that inflammatory response on the body. So things like outside of normal lettuce, you can go more advanced lettuce, if that makes sense. So things like miner's lettuce, going out and finding wild foods. So things like dandelion leaves. Dandelion is a weed, and generally, people try and destroy dandelion, but dandelion is highly, highly anti-inflammatory. So cutting off those leaves and putting those into your salad, rocket, using sprouts, things like having wheatgrass shots, all of these things are green and all of these are highly anti-inflammatory. My favorites are actually things like barley powders. You can get a lot of these in powder form, so you don't have to grow wheatgrass, even though I do recommend it. It's actually quite fun. But wheatgrass, very anti-inflammatory. Barley grass, you can either grow it and juice that as well, or you can buy a powder and then just use that in a smoothie. The other really powerful one is seaweeds. So some of us are a little bit scared of seaweeds. So just let me know, like if you guys have tried seaweeds before, but seaweeds, very, very anti-inflammatory and so healing for the body, very, very nourishing. So there's lots of good stuff in that. So that's kind of a really kind of simplistic way of explaining inflammation, is really that gauge. And coming back to that gauge, other things that will drive the gauge up is high stress. So if you feel high stress, that gauge is going to go up. It's going to drive inflammation in the body. And there are ways that you can reduce stress. Obviously, getting rid of the stresses that are in your life would be the first step. And if that's not possible, it's really looking at how do you better cope with those things. And the hardest thing is often we don't recognize that we are stressed or that we are creating stress. So sometimes women will come and they'll say to me, Mel, you don't get it. I have this shitty boss and he's always on my case, and I do so much work and I'm always putting in overtime, and so naturally I feel more stressed. But you have to question the driver behind that, so it's not surface level stuff. We're looking a little bit deeper. What is the driver, the thought pattern that makes you feel stressed about that? It's a care factor. It's because you actually care about your work. You actually care about doing the right thing by your boss. And so sometimes it's a simple case of shifting how you view what you do. Sometimes it's a case of shifting your beliefs around yourself. And that's kind of really uncovering the onion here. But I know for myself, I'll just share, like if you guys have ever felt overwhelmed in a job, like you're doing everything right, you feel like you're giving, and your boss keeps asking for more. And I noticed for myself that my kind of stressor around that was because I never felt that what I was doing was enough. And I think this is something that women possibly feel all round, the history, and, if we look over the history of how women have been treated in the workplace, etc. I mean, I don't want to get into all of that, but if we think about that, the whole essence of being a woman in the work environment is not often valued as much. And so we often feel like we need to prove ourselves more. And so that creates a stress in itself. And switching how you view yourself and switching how your beliefs around yourself is incredibly powerful and actually lowering that stress response. So when you go into that work environment, you're not saying, I need to do more, I need to do more, I haven't done enough, blah, blah. It's, I'm incredibly valuable here, and what I have to offer is valuable. And I'm giving my best, and repeating those phrases to yourself on an ongoing basis actually has incredibly powerful effects on lowering stress, because you're not constantly telling yourself these things that then create more anxiety, more overwhelm. And guess where you're sitting? In that high gauge of that inflammation. So, do you guys want to share any thoughts around that? Do you have any questions around that? Does that all make sense? No questions or anything? Okay. Yeah, so the other drivers of inflammation can be high intense exercise. So this has really been sold to us like, oh, you've got to do HIIT training, and you've got to, do kickboxing and all these high intensity exercises. But depending on where you're at in your life, so depending on what's going on, they can be a driver for more inflammation, because it essentially drives cortisol. And if you think about it, it's kind of this fight or flight type state. So we actually don't want that. We want to actually calm down the body, and we want to calm down the nervous system. So it's weird, because we're thinking, oh, we need to do those things for weight loss, but actually, oftentimes, women are gaining weight because they're under high stress. The cortisol's too high. And so the body is in a state of anxiety and stress, and so it's holding on to stuff, because it's like, under stress, I need to hold on to this energy source. So it's often counterintuitive. So it comes back to really, where are you at, what's happening in your life, and really being there for your body, really supporting your body. So not just pushing through, not just driving yourself so hard, and actually acknowledging, okay, what does my body need? And so doing things like yoga, doing breath work, incredibly powerful at reducing that stress state. So even just literally a 5-minute breathing routine, like if you're at work and you're super stressed, actually going into the bathroom and just focusing on breathing for 5 minutes will lower that inflammatory response. One of the things that women often do when they're in a state of pain is they get wrapped up in the pain. And I know I did this, so I totally get it. Is you're sitting in the bathroom and you're repeating the phrase, I'm in pain, this pain's never going to go away, it's really intense, I don't know what to do, and you're building up anxiety in that state. So you're repeating those phrases, and you're just making yourself more and more anxious, which unfortunately is just driving up that inflammation, which is just driving up the pain. So what we want to do is flick the switch to the other way, and actually lower those thought patterns, lower that state of anxiety. And so that's where the breathing comes in, but also really acknowledging what you're saying to yourself. So I am in control of this. I will be fine. I've been through this before. I got through it previously, and really acknowledging what's going on rather than resisting. So that's the other thing women do, is they resist. So they fight. And I hate the word warrior. we're not warriors against our body. We need to love our body. We need to appreciate what it's telling us. And so it's really acknowledging your body's doing the best it can, and listening in and tuning into that. So um you lost connection. Oh, okay. um So the green foods, okay, so the other green foods that I recommended, Alicia, was things that are outside. So anything green is your first point of call. And what you want to focus on is those superfoods that are highly nourishing. So things like barley, you can buy in a powder barley grass, you can buy in a powder wheatgrass. If you can grow your own and juice that, I know it's a bit of effort, but it's really, really powerful at reducing inflammation. Or you can buy that in a powder as well and just add those to the smoothies. My favorite is actually called wild foods. This means going out into a park or nature and finding foods that are grown in the wild that have nutritional benefits. One of the simplest ones is dandelion. I'm sure you know what a dandelion is. It's, one of my favorites. And dandelion is a weed. And so oftentimes people just try and get rid of dandelion, but it's really, really nourishing. So cutting off the leaves of the dandelion and chucking some of those into your salads, it's really, really nourishing. Miner's lettuce is another one I really love, which you can easily grow yourself. Seaweeds was the one that I mentioned, and super nourishing, super anti-inflammatory, very high in iron and iodine, which can be very low with women with endo. There is overlap with the thyroid running low with women with endo, and so iodine is really supportive to supporting your thyroid function. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. There's lots. Like, that's just a small list, and I do cover that quite extensively in our Endo Empowered Academy, and we are going to be releasing a Drop My Pain challenge in the hopefully next month, all going well, which is going to be like a food adventure. So we're literally going to go and explore all these foods from around the world and how they can really nourish the body and drive down inflammation. So it's not just avoiding, which I think a lot of women focus on avoiding. I hate avoiding. Like, to me, I hate restriction in general. I don't know how you guys feel, but I hate being restricted. I don't like being told I can't eat something, I can't do something. And so that was a big driver why I wanted to shift my endo, because I hated not being able to do things. And, particularly physical things, like I hated not being able to go for big hikes or, going out on the water or whatever it is. And so that was a big driver for me as to why I wanted to get things under control. So, so that Drop My Pain challenge is going to be like a food adventure that we're exploring and trying all different foods from around the world and how they can really nourish your body. I focus more on replenishing rather than taking out. So what's lacking in the body? How can we replenish what's lacking? And often there is nutrient deficiencies and things are running low, and so your body's struggling. So that's where a lot of the low energy and fatigue comes from. And so we replenish. How can we replenish what your body's needing? And so there are lots of foods that can do that. Okay, so coming back to understanding pain and understanding inflammation. So I guess I don't know how much you guys know in terms of the link between the two. So inflammation is a natural recurrence in the body. So the simplest way I can explain this is if you cut yourself and you have a cut and then that becomes red and swollen and painful. And this is intentional. The body wants to do this because it wants blood flow to come to that area so it can send all the dudes to heal that. And with endometriosis, there is essentially these dispersed cells in the wrong place, and your body's recognized that and wants to heal that. And so, guess what it does? It inflames that area. And that's where that pain is coming from. Now, there are prostaglandins in that space that send a message to the brain to say, hey, you need to send more inflammation this way because it thinks that there is a huge problem and it needs solving. Okay, now what's happening there is actually that the immune system is kind of just got the wrong signal. And so, what we work on is rebalancing that immune system. So, that messaging is going, actually, this is not such a big problem. Let's just clean those cells up. It's all good. Okay. And I'm really simplifying here, but that's essentially the approach that I've taken and how I've helped so many women get to a place where they're no longer experiencing pain and symptoms. We are focusing on lowering that inflammatory response, lowering that message that keeps going back to the brain saying, hey, you need to inflame this, you need to inflame this, because guess what that message is doing? It's triggering more pain, but it's also triggering more adhesions, more lesions, more of all of that stuff we don't want. Okay. And so we do this by lowering that gauge. And there's all sorts of different ways we do that. It's not just diet. It's a whole bunch of stuff to lower that inflammatory response. And so mainly we follow what I've called the REACH technique. So REACH is an acronym. I don't know how much you guys know about that, but REACH is an acronym. Replenish, so looking at your diet. E is exercise. A is affirm, and that's the stress emotional component, which we've covered. C is cleanse. And H is getting the support and help that you need. So having a supportive space where you can ask questions, where you can voice things that are worrying you, and you're not at it on your own. Because when you're at it on your own, guess what you're doing? Overthinking, over worrying, over researching. And that is driving anxiety, driving inflammation. So it's not helpful. I know you want to resolve this and you kind of got this whole, got to get this sorted, but it's not the approach that actually helps heal. It's sort of counterintuitive, if that makes sense. Now, the C in the REACH technique stands for cleanse. There are a lot of mostly digestive things that can be a trigger for the imbalances that thereby cause inflammation. One of the biggest ones is Candida. So Candida is found in lots of women with endo, and I think it's got a lot to do with the treatments, unfortunately, that were prescribed previously. So things like the contraceptive pill, hormone treatments, having a lot of painkillers, they all interfere with the natural microbiome that's in the gut. And because of that, there is imbalance. There's what's called dysbiosis. So essentially, like I said in the beginning, that hose, it's become inflamed. And that can be part of that picture. Also, the microbiome doesn't just sit in the gut. It's not confined to that space. All the peritoneal fluid that's in the abdomen all goes everywhere, and it goes, throughout the abdominal area. So if there's inflammation, it's going to trigger inflammation everywhere. So that's why healing the gut and healing those imbalances is a big part of it. So I hope that is helpful. I would love it if you guys want to share some questions. If you have any things that you want to share with me in terms of what I've shared today, if there's any questions around that, or if there's any insights that you think were valuable, if I've just confused the crap out of you. This is my first live, so I feel like perhaps I've been rambling a lot. So feel free to let me know where you guys are at, because I'd love to get some idea. And then I will go on to some of the questions that were submitted. Any other questions or anything? Leisha, feel free to ask me any other questions or share any insights that have been helpful on that. Okay, and then we've had somebody else also vote on pain with sex. Okay, so with pain with sex, there's two things going on there. So the first one is, how do I explain this? Really just like what I would call you're not ready kind of pain. So oftentimes when we've had painful sex in the past, the whole process of getting your body ready to have sex isn't there. So because there's psychological concerns there. So you're feeling like, oh, I'm scared, it's going to be sore, and so you close up and you're not well lubricated, and so things are going to be painful because you need to be you need to be ready. And oftentimes there's a feeling of being rushed as well, like almost like I just want to get this over with. So that's the first kind of general reason that women experience pain. And I have done I've done like a little mini course on that. So I'll be happy to share that with you if you want to just send me an email after this. So just support@endoempowered.com, and I can share that with you. It really talks a lot about how you can support yourself with it. And I've got like a free lube that you can make and all sorts of cool stuff in that as well. So I'll be happy to share that with you. But yeah, and so that's the first thing, is really looking at, okay, is it because you're not actually physically ready to have sex, which often is quite easy to resolve, to be honest. But the other option is that it's deep penetrative sex. And look, this is very common with endometriosis, depending on where the endometriosis is sitting in the pelvic area. But this is really obviously addressing the endometriosis in the first place. So that's where, following everything that I've shared today will really help you. But initially, just looking at, okay, what positions are more painful and which positions are less painful. And just starting there, because you don't want to get into a state where it's just a complete avoidance again. There are ways around the pain with sex. And so I can talk a little bit more. I have got that whole program for you, which I'm happy to share with you. So just let me know. All right. Now we had a few other questions that came in. So one of the questions that came in was around pain at work and how you deal with a work environment where you're experiencing pain. Now, I remember myself experiencing that and actually wanting to go home, and my boss sort of insisting that I stay because there was a presentation that needed to go out, and he said that I didn't have a choice about that and I had to stay. And I remember being in such intense pain, like literally bowled over on my desk, just trying to get this presentation done. So I totally get it. As I said before, I think the biggest thing not to do is to get into that vicious whirlwind state of overdriving the thought patterns on the pain intensity. And I know that's so hard to do. I totally know how hard that is to do, because when you're in that state, you feel very alone. It's like you're at work, nobody gets why you're in pain, nobody understands the pain. And so there's almost like the sense of, if I repeat that I'm in pain and I'm struggling to myself, it's I'm acknowledging it to myself. I don't know if that makes sense, but to me that was what was happening. And so I definitely know that loop can happen where you overbuild that state of pain. There's a couple of things you can do. So obviously just try and talk yourself out of that. So, like I said before, statements of, I've got this, I've been through this before, it's all good, I'm okay, rather than those other thoughts. The other things you can do is there's something called a TENS machine. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but they actually use it during labor. So it is very light electric pulses that you place on the abdomen, and it really just helps alleviate that pain. I have got one here, so I will do a video for you guys at some point explaining how that works. But it is quite helpful. Just the key thing, I guess, that I really, if you experience pain, is don't just look at it as, I just want a solution right now. I just want a supplement, or I want a machine, or I want, something right now, because it's a process and it's a journey, and that's where you're really going to get the long-term relief. Those things can get you through, sure, but at the end of the day, especially natural things, they take a little bit of time. So really focusing on building a strategy for yourself, deciding, okay, I'm going to work at this, I'm going to get my pain under control, and I'm going to implement things to make that happen. And it's literally just every single day, how can I better support myself today? How can I really nourish my body today? I don't want it to become this big overwhelming thing, because I know we can easily get into that space. It's really about, what can I do today? What's within my reach today? Yes, I've got a lot going on. Yes, there's this going on, that going on. But how can I support myself? What's available to me right now? And doing that, So let me know, like, if that makes sense. And if you guys are feeling overwhelmed, let me know that as well, because it's very common for women to feel overwhelmed when trying to do this natural thing, because there's a lot of information, and oftentimes it's contradictory, and so we don't really know, is this going to work or isn't this going to work? So yeah. Now, also with the pain at work, do not use hot water bottles, ladies. I know everyone's like, yeah, you can't tell me not to use a water bottle. But I have found through my research that water bottles actually make the situation worse. There is a video on that on my YouTube channel as well. So if you guys want to watch that, I've done an interview with someone who worked with adhesions for years, and he found that when women used hot water bottles, the adhesions were far worse. And he really noticed the correlation, because he could feel where the adhesions had built up, where typically women put that hot water bottle. So if you want to use something, use a cold one. I want you to think about this, you see, because we've talked about inflammation and redness and heat. And when you're doing that, and then you're adding a hot water bottle on top of that, it doesn't make sense. It's already inflamed. It's already hot. It's already red. Adding more heat is just going to contribute to that. So if you want to do anything, use a cold water bottle and lower that inflammatory response. That would be my advice on that. Okay, so I don't see any other questions or any other thoughts. So let me know. That's all I've got today from the questions. I've kind of covered it all indirectly anyway. So let me know, guys, if there's any questions or anything. Any other questions? I guess I'll leave you with basically, you can get through this. Pain doesn't need to be something you learn to live with. I know doctors will tell you that. They will say you have to just take painkillers and just learn to live with the pain. But you don't. I've worked with thousands of women around the world, and I can tell you that they have reduced their pain. They do live normal lives even after being diagnosed with endo, and even severe endo, like stage 4. It is possible. I'm living proof. There are many other women who've done this. And if you want to hear those stories, then reach out to me, and I'll be happy to invite you into our support space where you can read about these stories. You can watch videos of these stories of women who've overcome things that you would never believe in a million years would be possible to do naturally. But the body wants to heal. The body wants to heal. And so we just need to support it so it can do its job. So I want to just leave you with that and let you know that there is hope. There is a way forward, and I'm here for you. So feel free to reach out, support@endoempowered.com. Okay, thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Leisha, for sharing your insights and questions. And anyone else who's here, thank you. I really appreciate you guys. And I will see you next week. So thanks so much. Okay, bye.